Ask Reddit. What's the weirdest thing you've seen happen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? When I was in about first grade, my best friend at the time had a lot of temper tantrums. We were having a sleepover, and I fell asleep in her bedroom. In the middle of the night, I woke up in a different bed with her father. I was so confused, but he explained that she had a temper tantrum and her mom went to sleep in her bed with her, so they moved me to the guest room. I was young and didn't understand that's not normal that he was sleeping in the same bed as me, just him and me. I told my parents when I went home the next day, and they were extremely concerned, asking me if he touched me, etc. I was highly confused because my pure innocent mind didn't understand the concept of that, lol. Now as an adult I'm like, why didn't they just move me to the other room? Why did the dad have to get in bed with me? LOL. They're truly good people and nothing happened, but it's weird. More of a date story. Was on a date with a guy who was cooking dinner for me, and his dog took a giant horse piss in the living room. I jumped up, a bit panicked, trying to get the guy's attention to what just happened. The guy didn't even look up when he said, "Oh yeah, she does that sometimes," and that was it. I asked him if there was a towel and disinfectant I could use to help clean it up, and the guy says I'll just throw some Febreze on it after dinner. I suddenly realized the musty smell I noticed earlier wasn't from his cool and rustic cabin being under a canopy of trees, or that the floor in the same location that bowed when you stepped over it was because it was old. Ate dinner at a table that was couple feet away from the dog toilet. Left. Fucking gross. At every meal, my ex's parents would set a plate on the table for the dog. The dog would sit in a chair and eat at the table with the people. Here's an I was that family story. My godmother, who was practically an aunt, ran a fairly successful daycare out of her home in the 90s. She was a first-generation immigrant to the US, whose parents came to the New England area from Ireland. My two younger brothers and I spent a lot of time at her home, and I was generally the oldest child there. When I was about 8 years old, she started to have me make her favorite drink. Gin and tonic. She drank these all day, while running her home daycare. At age 8 I knew how to mix cocktails, that forks were better for stirring than spoons, and that large plastic bottles of gin were cheap and low quality. This went on for years, on pretty much a daily basis, until my family moved out west. My godmother kept her daycare running until she died, I'm sure of health problems relating to alcohol. I was 15 when she passed, and I'm in my 30s now. I honestly went most of my life thinking nothing of it, until I became a father a couple of years ago. At which point I was like, how the fuck did anyone let her have a daycare? Side note, I drink but would consider myself an average drinker, if not below average. With that being said, I could never stomach the thought of gin and didn't try gin until I was 30. This was because I once licked my finger, early in my daycare bartending career, after a couple of drops of gin splashed on my hand as I was pouring. That plastic half-gallon quality gin was the worst thing I'd ever had in my life, and I had no idea how my godmother liked it so much. Complete ruined my taste for gin, at 8. Found out my best friend thought the toilet seat was for kids. He would straight up sit on the rim of the toilet and poop until I found out when we were in college at 22. Family had like styrofoam bricks next to the couch in the living room for the explicit purpose of throwing at the TV if they didn't like the show, or if a character said something stupid. I had a friend in HS. We're still friends today actually. His mom was a hoarder. There were little pathways throughout the house, but it was filled, from floor to ceiling, with junk. In the hallway to the bedrooms, she had stacked every newspaper she ever got. They were tied up in bundles. When you walked in that hallway, he would caution to not touch the papers because if a row fell, it would take a couple hours to dig yourself out. Don't worry about the bed bugs, they don't hurt that much. They let the dogs and cats into the basement to go to the bathroom even though they had a fenced-in backyard. The whole house smelled, even the kids when they went to school. So when I was younger my dad died. My mom remarried and had 2 kids. I was moved into the basement. Unfinished basement. I didn't think anything of it since I was 10. I had a sheet blocking my area from the laundry area. It had bare concrete walls, wood beams and piping across the ceiling and cement flooring. Used a heater and dehumidifier cause it was cold and humid. When I used the heater my parents would make my sheeted area around my bed so it would heat up the space quicker. Parents didn't allow any of my friends over and my brother and sister weren't allowed in my room. Distant family members also never stayed over, and when we had family gathering, I was told to go into the guest room instead of my room while they were there. I thought cool, I have a huge room and no one can mess it up. My family would go on vacations yearly without me from when I was 12 till I was 18. I was the dog and house watcher. During one of those vacations when I was 17, I invited a friend come over. They pointed out how fucked up it was that there were bedrooms fully furnished with TVs for my brother and sister, a guest room fully furnished as well with a TV, and how I was in the basement with sheets for walls and bathroom mats on the floor. I completely dismissed it cause it was normal to me. It wasn't till I was 20 that I found out that the family trips that I didn't go on were paid for with money that I was getting from my dad passing away. I'm sure I got some of the money in food and clothes and whatever I needed. But it's got me pretty fucked up cause my brother and sister don't have any memory of it, and when I talk about it they always back my parents by saying we were raised right and I opted out of vacations. They also thought the guest room was my room. My family were very comfortable and my mom always babysat lots of kids from around the neighborhood. Basically her place was just where the kids hung out. Once there was an emergency with my dad and my mom really needed somebody to watch me overnight, and I wound up with one of the families that she babysat for. They were really nice people, and I was close friends with their kids obviously because they were at my house every day. It was a new experience though. This was the first time I'd ever seen people living in real poverty. I was kind about it and I didn't say anything, but parts of it were a real shock to me. The toilet didn't work, but they had just continued to use it to the point that it was piled up to the seat. We had to unscrew the light bulb to turn off the lights because the switch would shock you if you touched it. I felt really bad for them. It was just a real eye-opener for me as a kid, and it gave me a much better understanding of exactly why my mom babysat and fed all those kids. I babysat for a family on occasion and the kids would always ask for a cool cup and I had no clue what it was. They asked for them constantly but were too little to really describe them enough for me to understand. I mentioned it to the mom in passing one day and she started laughing and cut the tops off of some bell peppers and took out the seeds and then filled the peppers with tap water. The kids went nuts over them like they were treats. It was really weird to me that drinking water out of bell peppers was a thing to beg for on the regular. Stayed at a friend's house when I was probably 10 or 11, and we had a sleepover one night, and we were up really late playing games and just talking. Around 3 to 4 a.m., his dad comes in, frantic, saying that he heard someone breaking in upstairs, and that we needed to leave immediately. Anyways, we walk out of the house, and he tells the neighbor that they need to leave too. The neighbor looked extremely worried and pulled her phone out. We drive to a place and he gets us some food and eventually an ambulance comes and so does the neighbor along with it, because apparently the father was schizophrenic and having an episode. There was really no break-in. Obviously my friend now knows this, but back then, we genuinely believed him. Had a friend whose family lived on a huge property and kept cows for the property tax exemption, not odd. He told me to come by and get some purple ringers he collected for me. Invited me in to meet his parents and I swear to God, there was a full-size cow chilling on one of their couches in the living room. That sight was way more wild than any of the hallucinations later experienced. Really nice people though, LOL. Growing up we had some goats and land, but no cows. My brother decided to go to the livestock auction with one of his friends and saw a baby cow being sold for meat. I guess he just couldn't stand the thought of this poor little cow being sold to be eaten, so he won the auction for it. Walked it home somehow. Didn't put it in the pasture, nor the backyard, but inside the house instead. My mom came home from work and was like, "Excuse me everyone, why is there a cow in the hallway?" LMAO, he got in so much trouble. Loved that cow though, he thought he was a goat. In 6th grade, my first ever sleepover, I went to the bathroom and came out to him blasting porn in the living room, and I had never seen porn before. We watch it for like 10 minutes and he says, "I'm so horny I gotta jack off bro." Then he started cranking his dick right there in front of me, and I was shocked. The video was some fat dude cucking another guy and making him cry. I'll never forget that. I'm speechless. WTF. My friend's mom told him to masturbate later today, just casually, like it was a regular thing to say to your kids. He was just like, "Yeah sure." A friend of a friend in college didn't realize you were supposed to masturbate when you felt like it. Instead, he'd schedule time like once a week in his calendar to remind himself to masturbate. I had a buddy in college who was a very anxious and nervous person. He had a first date with a girl from class coming up and he was panicking. So we told him that he should go ahead clean the pipes before the date to help ease his nerves. And come to find out that this 20-year-old dude had never masturbated before. And basically he tried once, but couldn't get the hang of it, and was embarrassed and uncomfortable, so he never tried again. He was saying that maybe he was doing it wrong. So we asked him how he did it, and he described something along the lines of making a kind of claw with his hand and trying to fuck his fingertips. Like this. And we're like, well, there's your problem. And explained the more standard grip. He left after a bit because I think he was a bit embarrassed and stuff. Then like an hour later he comes back. He walks in with a swagger and attitude that I've never seen before. The most relaxed face and a tiny smirk on his lips. And we all instantly knew that he had released years and years of built-up tension and pressure. From then on, the guy was chill AF and actually wound up dating that girl from class for several months. Shit was wild. When I was younger, I was best friends with two brothers from Jamaica. One of the days they asked me to stay over so we could play some Atari after we finished playing outside. We came home 12 minutes after their curfew, so their dad, who was extremely calm, told us to sit in the living room. I sat in there with my two friends, and they were super quiet, which was a bit weird until their dad walked in with a belt and beat the living shit out of them. I shit myself, not literally, because I thought I was in for a beating, but he didn't hit me, which was a huge relief. After the beating their dad, asked if I would like some carrot juice while my friends just went back to normal and set up their Atari like nothing happened. I was sat on the sofa wondering what the fuck just went on. Roaches crawling around in daylight out in the open. I wouldn't sit or eat anything the 3 times I went over. His entire family seemed to think it was normal to have roaches where he was. I had family in the same building, and their house was almost sterile. My GF and her little brother were staying at a sort of foster home that was absolutely filthy. They knew it was, but weren't going to complain about it since it was still better than their last situation. But the parents there had 2 little boys of their own, and it's their normal. I feel bad that those boys will either realize their home is disgusting and never invite anyone over, or have someone over who then embarrasses them or doesn't want to be their friend anymore because of it. Slept over at a friend's when I was around 10. She was the only girl in her family, and had 5 brothers, whose ages ranged from like 4 to 15. Everything about my friend's room/sleeping situation was normal. But her brother's room was bizarre. They shared one big room, with 3 bunk beds. Each mattress a fitted sheet, a pillow, and nothing else. No top sheets, no blankets, no comforters. Also, the boys didn't have pajamas. They all just slept in the clothes they had worn that day with their shirts tucked into their pants, and belts on too. Their room didn't have a door, and neither did their connected bathroom or their closets. Turns out they were fundamentalist Christians, and the boys' setup was meant to prevent masturbation. My house, but looking back it's unusual. My dad was a doctor, and it was not uncommon for him to take a patient's blood on the way home and store it in the fridge next to the orange juice overnight. Then take it to work the next morning. Can't do that these days of course, but the 70s was pretty wild. One of the first times I met my husband's family, I was over at their house and husband gestured for me to sit down and be comfortable. Their house was really very cluttered. Not quite hoarder cluttered, but close. They had a couple of couches facing each other and then some other chairs. Not knowing the rules, I sat on one of the couches, which had a lot of stuffed teddy bears on it. OMG, you would think I had sat down on live bears. There were probably 20 to 30 small medium stuffed bears on this couch. Husband's mother and twin brother both visibly reacted as if I had damaged the bears. Not antique bears either. That was when I was told that the couch was for the bears, and only for the bears, and that no one was allowed to sit on the bears' couch. Just the bears. The bears all had little beaded necklaces with their names on them to tell them apart because they were all the same brand and style. And you married him after the bear seating snafu? OP can't reply. There is another bear on that sofa now with the cutest little necklace hanging round its neck. Floridian reader, it says. Such curious affairs. Saw my friend spit in her house, straight onto the carpet. I didn't go back. Kinda the opposite. Had a friend over when my dad went on a tirade screaming and yelling at my brother and I. We thought it was normal to have emotionally abusive parents. After that friend never came over again. I went to his house. And his parents seemed a bit more interested in me. By the time we graduated high school, I got my diploma and walked over to hug his parents before my own at the ceremony. I remember asking my mom how come she didn't like me like my friends' moms liked their girls. I told her they always hugged and talked to each other and laughed. And said I love you multiple times throughout the day. I was 10. My mom rolled her eyes at me and went to her room. I tried and tried to be close to her until I was about 16. I finally realized she didn't give a shit about being close to me. She was very affectionate and close to my brothers and little sister. After she realized I didn't care anymore, she started to make an effort. I'm extremely lucky for my dad though. He was there for me for anything and everything. Later on I realized she was extremely jealous and hated that my dad doted on me. Not at my friend's house, but we were 15-year-olds and went for a walk to her mom's friend's house to get her some smokes. We walked into the house and the 2-year-old was covering themselves in margarine, the floor was covered in roaches, animal poop, used nappies, diapers, and rubbish. There was peanut butter on the walls and kitchen table. It was so incredibly sad to see dirty and disheveled kids living in that. The weirdest part was seeing the toddlers smearing margarine in their hair and no one caring. The rest was disgusting, but I'd seen that kind of living before. Never the complete indifference towards a baby though. Awful. Was sleeping over at a friend's house in 6th grade. 3 p.m. we show up to her house after school. We walked into her apartment to find her mom half-dressed, passed out drunk and sprawled out with her head on the floor, one arm twisted weirdly so it somehow was resting on the coffee table, and her legs on the couch. TV was on and blaring. Didn't even notice our arrival. I had zero experience with this kind of thing, and although I could tell my friend was embarrassed, I didn't understand the full implications or really what was happening. I pretty much just thought it was an odd place for a nap, which is how I explained it to my parents later when I commented on how odd it was to be napping there instead of in bed. I might have even asked them if they would let me sleep on the couch and watch TV too. Bless my parents for immediately understanding the situation, but not making a scene and not spoiling my naivete or ever embarrassing my friend in any way. My family is pretty good at being subtle. For better or worse. However, that was absolutely the last time I stayed at her house. All sleepovers with that particular friend were at my house from then on. But it was a casual coincidence from my POV, I didn't even notice that subtle change for a couple years. Looking back, I think my friend really appreciated it though. We're still friends and she has kids of her own and she's doing great, is a doctor, but her mom still has the same alcohol struggles and is very in your face about it even now as she was then. A toddler drinking a wine cooler. The whole family was fucked up, but that stuck out to me for obvious reasons. I was only 18 at a party, drinking underage, and had no idea what to do when I saw that. I made a comment about how little kids probably shouldn't drink alcohol, but the kid's mom got scary defensive about it. How does one defend that? Back in high school, I had a friend whose mom seemed super chill, would let us come over to smoke, drink, and hang out. At one point though, shit got super weird when one of the other guys in our friend group started banging the friend's mom. The guy who was having sex with our friend's mom ended up getting super aggro and like bossing the kid around because he was screwing his mom. It was definitely fucked up and no one did anything about it. The other friends in the group would rag on the mom's son about it, but like left it at that. My dad was a truck driver who was able to bring home boxes of food if its packaging was damaged. All my friends would go home with full boxes of Captain Crunch and pancake mix. After a while my friends would have to tell my dad that their parents told them to come home empty-handed. My friend's mom kept bread in the glove box of her car for when she got hungry. He thought it was hilarious also, and we gave her a pretty bad time about it. My friend had 9 siblings. Whenever I was there and we ate, he always told me to protect my food. He literally covered his plate by surrounding it with his arms. His brothers kept stealing food from the younger ones and their parents didn't do anything to stop them, it was just normal. Edit, my friend grew up in rural Canada and is in his 20s. That's crazy. There were 12+ kids in our family, always had friends over, and we had a no-like dish in the middle of the table to put any food we didn't like for others who did like. No one was allowed thirds unless everyone that wanted seconds had seconds. Went to this girl's house in primary school. I'm ashamed to say it was because I felt bad that she was getting bullied at school, and in hindsight she had a learning disability. She was nice though, just sometimes said really uncomfortable things for an 11-year-old. Anyway, she had a 3-year-old brother, and I saw her mom reading a book titled How to Be a Good Mom or something similar. She started screaming at this toddler for not vacuuming his room and referencing the book. I was like, "Ma'am? You expect this infant to vacuum his room?" To be fair, he did end up doing it, but mind blown. Their family had a really weird dynamic. When I was in junior high, I went over to friend's house for the first time. His parents were hoarders and their basement was waist-deep in newspapers, magazines, junk mail, catalogs, phone books, and other loose papers. You had to crawl over it to get to his room. He acted like it was no big deal that the papers were higher than the couch, or that an avalanche happened every time he opened his bedroom door. That was the only time I went over. Went to friend's house as a kid. Sitting at the dining table for lunch. House phone rings. Everyone falls to the floor around me, including the mom and dad. I'm the only one left sitting there. The dad informs me that I now must answer the phone. Hello. Johnson's house. I hold the phone out to the dad. It's for you. Everyone laughs. I am so uncomfortable. The next time that phone rang, I was the fastest to the floor, I can tell you that. Such a fun, loving family. Loved going around there. Dad was cooking meth in the attic. He was a scientist and these were his science experiments. My friend and his older sibling thought nothing was strange about this. I was 13 and knew it was a meth lab right away from the smell, cat piss. They taught us that neat fact in the DARE classes in school.